are you? And where are you going? What do you want?
Hello and welcome to People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and I'm here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk about job hunting, starting and running a business, and building wealth. So all of the financial aspects of life, that is what this show is devoted to. So today, and I've been promoting this all week, today I'm going to be talking about something called lifestyle creep. Now, this is not some, weirdo who follows you around, i.e. creep, C-R-E-A-P. This is lifestyle creep, C-R-E-E-P. It's how our expenses kind of, it seems like almost under the radar, end up exceeding our income. And I can tell you that as much as I work to guard against this in my life, I see it happening, and it's quite insidious because so much of our financial lives are on sort of automatic pilot. This sort of lifestyle creep ends up happening, and we don't even realize it. It's just all of a sudden we feel like every month we're falling behind or strapped for money, and yet we don't perceive that we're doing anything significantly different. Okay, so that's not to say that all of lifestyle creep comes from sort of automated finances. Sometimes automated finances can be the solution to it, but that is, I know for me, that's oftentimes where it comes from. Because in order to be more productive, I have most of my financial life set up that things get paid automatically, and then, you know, once a month, I pay my credit card bill, and kind of done, right? But that can be a problem as well. So classically, lifestyle creep occurred where as your income increased, your expenses increased more, right? So we have a tendency to want to reward ourselves as we progress financially, right? So I know when I had my real estate company before I was in the Navy, I think I've told this story maybe once before. So I was driving a car. I mean, it was a nice car, but I had always wanted a convertible BMW. And finally, I got to the point where I could afford one. And so I bought it. And then I felt tremendously guilty, right, for rewarding myself for my financial success by buying, such an expensive car, a car that probably cost twice as much as any car anyone in my family had ever owned. Right. And it took some real sort of soul searching on my part um, to become comfortable with driving the car around. And in this case, I could afford it. So it wasn't an issue of lifestyle creep where I couldn't afford it. I was saving money from in my retirement account, and no trouble paying my rent or anything like that. But that's just, that's kind of the mindset, though, is, well, I did well, or I got a raise, so I'm going to do, X for myself. These kinds of things, if we're not careful, our finances get out of hand, and we, like I said, we wake up one day, a few months or a couple of years later, and we realize we're in over our head, and now we have to make some very significant changes. So one of the I mentioned this at the beginning. One of the ways that lifestyle creep is so insidious is, so I saw this. I think it was toward the end of last year, beginning of this year. I noticed that the cost of phone and internet services had roughly tripled since when I had originally signed up for them. And I'm looking at this like, how can I be spending what amounted to uh, in total about $400 a month for Wi-Fi service and cell phone service? And I looked at them and I realized that in the case of the internet services, the cost was double what I had originally set up, signed up for. And in the case of phone service, it had gone up, I think, something like two-thirds. So, I started looking for a less expensive alternatives. And when all was said and done, I was able to find an alternative by switching companies that saved me 75% of the monthly cost for those services. So they went from over $300 a month to $80 a month. Okay. And I was talking to someone at the cell phone carrier that I had canceled because they didn't do the cancellation right. And she said, "Well, why didn't you call us? We would have, reduced the price." I said, "I did call you." Not her. I called the company and I told them I needed to reduce my costs, and all they wanted to do was sell me more services. They didn't want to discuss reducing the costs. And she said, "Well, the company that you moved to, they're just going to increase you in a year." And I said, "Yeah, I already anticipated that. I put a reminder in my calendar. 11 months from now, I need to start shopping for new telephone and internet services, right? Because I'm going to get a big increase, and the same kind of creep is going to start happening again unless I, in an aware way, in a conscious way, make sure that my expenses are staying controlled." So, this is where having certain of our expenses on autopilot, I think, is problematic, because the cell phone companies, the internet service providers, they increase prices. They may notify us of them. I presume they do. I don't know. I don't recall ever seeing them, but I'm sure it's in their contract. They're permitted to do it. And by the way, I'm not saying that they're, bad or evil for increasing prices. If they can increase prices and people pay it, well, hey, I guess that's fine. But I know for me, the reality is, knowing their cost structure, right? That the cost of operating their businesses, didn't double over the 4 years that I had service with the particular companies with which I had service, right? So I'm not willing to pay more for it. And there are enough companies out there, and there always seems to be one that is, trying to grab business from the others, and so I can always switch to that one. Now, there was one time when that wasn't the case. For some reason, all the companies were holding their line, and they weren't giving big discounts. But okay, so that particular time, okay, that's what it was going to cost me, right? I shopped it and I was like, okay, Lord, there was no point in changing because I wasn't going to be able to reduce my costs. But in general, I think there are opportunities for us to reduce those kinds of expenses that we tend to have on autopilot because they just bill to our credit card each month, and thereby stop the lifestyle creep. So these are the kinds of things that make lifestyle creep so sneaky, and so we've got to outsmart it and ourselves by putting systems in place to prevent this from happening. So on this side of my computer over here, I can click onto here. I have my Apple reminders, and at the moment I have 166 scheduled. You may say, that's like blowing your mind, right? But those are my reminders over the next year, right? So and in some cases there are some reminders that only happen every 2 years. Certain filings I have to make for to maintain my business entity, right? So by setting up those kind of reminders, I don't have to be, worrying, oh, should I be checking the cost of my cell phone service? I know it'll pop up on my reminders at the appropriate time, and so I can go on about my regular day or take care of, more important business. And when it's time for me to, take the next step in checking lifestyle creep, it'll come up on my reminders and I'll take care of it then. Right. And I always give myself advance time because I don't want to be in a situation where, like, this is the last day, you have to do it today. And now I have something super important, so I can't get to that particular task. So, I give myself a month's leeway in order to take care of something like that. So, but that's why it's so sneaky, because these things happen kind of outside our cognizance, right? And it builds up. And the other thing is small expenses. So when I say small expenses, I mean things like, eating out. Okay. Although eating out has gotten, significantly more expensive over the last few years, especially if you're a, single person like me. For one person to eat out, what is it? It's, I don't know. I mean, kosher food eating out is more expensive than non-kosher food. But even kosher food, it's 30, $40, maybe $50 if I'm having, an extra dish from the, from Bodhi Thai or something like that. And, uh, it's so convenient now. We can have food delivered. We can schedule it in the morning to have it delivered in the, in the late afternoon when we're done working. And I know for me, I've done working, I've had my shower, I've had my, whiskey and soda, and now I can just relax, have my dinner, maybe watch, a movie, and then, read a little bit, and go to bed or whatever. It's such a nice light and such a nice way of treating myself. But what I realized is that while, 30, 40, even $50 once in a while is no big deal, to start doing that multiple times a week, 2, 3, 4 times a week, it adds up really quickly. All of a sudden, you're talking about several $100s a month. Okay. And because each individual expenditure is relatively small, it doesn't affect us the same way as if we had to pay, like $300 a month for eating out, okay, or $400 a month, or whatever the total monthly tab would be for eating out, right? So that's another reason that lifestyle creep is so sneaky, is oftentimes it comes through a series of what seem to be reasonably small expenditures, and that are made, each time, and we don't realize until the bill comes at the end of the month, like, why is my credit card bill so high, right? So for those reasons, we need to be diligent about making sure we're not falling prey to lifestyle creep. Now, maybe I should have started with this. Look, if you've got a huge income, and you already own your own house, if you want to, you have money, you're putting money away, so you have savings, you have a rainy day account, you've got, money set aside for whatever. Okay. And so then, and if it's falling within your, monthly or annual income, so then maybe eating out every night is fine, because you're not, that's not really lifestyle creep within your overall finances. Okay. Where lifestyle creep is so insidious is where it's pushing us to the point where we really can't afford the lifestyle that we're living. Okay. So the psychological triggers behind lifestyle creep, it's important to understand them. Okay. So part of it can be social pressures. So, if you have a group of friends and they eat out all the time, right? You may feel like you've got to eat out all the time too, to kind of keep up. These call it keeping up with the Joneses. The poor Joneses over the decades. This much maligned, fictitious family, right? But that can be a problem. Or if you're again, if you're single and you socialize a lot, and so you're going out for cocktails all the time or whatever. I mean, that can be very expensive if especially if you're the person who likes to pick up the check. This was something that I did back in my 30s and 40s. When I was doing well financially before I joined the Navy. I would think nothing of picking up the check for several people. It made me feel. I think it made me feel, frankly, like a bigwig. Right? Hey, I'll pick up. I've got this. Don't worry. Enjoy, kind of thing. Right? And you do that, a couple times, 3, 4 times a month, and it's very easy to exceed your income. Especially if you habituate your friends that, hey, I'm not going to have to pay for this. Kevin's going to pay for it. So so there you go. So you know my experience from that time taught me, okay, that's not that the kind of dopamine hit, I guess we would call it, that I get from picking up the check. Got to find another way to satisfy it, okay, than picking up the check. So I train myself not to do that anymore. Other things are, for most of us, life is tough, right? uh, it's stressful. Sometimes we work very long hours. And living in a city like Los Angeles, you drive, there's traffic. In the summer, it's hot. I mean, even worse in the Southeast where it's hot and humid. So just moving around your day is, it's trying, right? And so we live in a culture that basically says you deserve whatever it is. And I have to say, that message as a consumer message is incredibly destructive. It's absolutely insidious. The fact of the matter is, we don't deserve much of anything. Okay. We deserve what we can afford and earn. That's the reality. Okay. If we can't afford it, if we didn't earn it, we do not deserve it. Right. That's the part of that message that's left out. But I hear it all the time, whether it's when I'm watching, Tubi, commercial on Tubi. That's the free entertainment service I use, or whether it's on some sort of, something on social media. Oh, you deserve this. No, we don't. For the most part, we don't deserve most of the things that people are telling us we deserve. So, but we've been trained to believe, oh, I deserve, a vacation at a 5-star spa in I don't know, in not Boca Raton. That's not Tony enough. It's a nice place, but it's not Palm Beach. That's the place I was trying to think of, a little bit farther up the coast, right? I deserve that. Well, no, probably not. I mean, if you can afford it, so then you can afford it. But whether you deserve it or not, who knows, right? But because of the stress of daily life and the blaring consumer messages we get, so it really almost compels us into lifestyle creep, into taking on financial burdens, really, that we can't afford, or financial obligations is really the better term. Financial obligations that we can't afford, that are inappropriate for where we're at financially. And so again, we need to be aware of the financial triggers and do things to counteract them. So one of the things I do is I've learned to detest this word deserve, right? Because it's trying to get me to do something that probably I should not be doing. That's really what it comes down to, right? Is it deceptive marketing within the definition, of the law, like the um, uh, I can't think of it. There's a federal agency that deals with deceptive advertising. I mean, I don't know, don't care. But what I do care about is marketers. Sometimes they're trying to present me with something that will help me live a better life, but oftentimes they're just trying to sell their stuff. Whether it enhances my life or not is immaterial, and that's fine. I'm not saying that they shouldn't do that. All I'm saying is it's up to me, it's up to us to decide whether a particular product or service is actually beneficial for us. Okay. And there starts the real root of dealing with lifestyle creep. It's one of the initial steps into adulthood, which I recognize is not something a lot of people in this country really want to do. They don't want to be adults, right? If you have children, or if you had children, or you've been around children, children are wants embodied. I want this, I want that. Can I have a this? Can I have that? Right? Look, they it's part of just human nature, I think, that we are acquisitive, meaning we want to acquire stuff, right? So while with children, hopefully there is a parent around to help them learn to control that behavior. For those of us who are already adults, we need to we need self-control with respect to that aspect of life. Okay. And so this part of not becoming subject to lifestyle creep is to sit ourselves in an adult role and then make good decisions about really what is it in life that we need and want that will really enhance our life. I'm going to talk more about that in a few minutes. I want to talk about a couple of other things, though, before I get to more deeply into the remedy. Okay, and we're going to take a sponsor break. When life brings unexpected changes, managing inherited property shouldn't add to your stress. Magnum Properties specializes in probate and trust real estate management. We handle the complexities while you focus on what matters most. From property maintenance to tenant relations, from legal compliance to maximizing value, we're your trusted partner through every step. Magnum Properties, Inc., turning property challenges into peace of mind. Call us today at 213-264-4396 or visit magnumprops.com. So this is People Making Money, and I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we're talking about lifestyle creep. And I was talking about some of the psychological factors behind it, the triggers, the way marketing will try and convince us that we deserve something, we need to have something, and how we as adults need to make decisions about really what it is we need and want that will truly enhance our life. So I want to talk next about what is the impact on our long-range financial well-being because of lifestyle creep, right? So if for example, one of the things you want to do is own your own home, well, so then presumably that means saving up enough money for a down payment so you can afford to buy the home. So the average or the median home price in the United States, I think, is getting around $500,000, okay, 400 plus $1,000, right? So a 20% down payment is going to be close to $100,000, okay? Think about that. That's more than double what it was when I was a young man. I'll put it to you that way, okay? And that's a lot of money to save up. And lifestyle creep can mean that you just aren't going to be able to save up that much money, right? So you won't be able to own a house if that's your goal. And by the way, that's just a median house. Now, in some markets, when I do my economic echoes, I oftentimes look at Omaha, Nebraska. So the median home price there is more around $400,000. But even there, 20% down is $80,000. That's a lot of money, right? Here in California, the median home price is over $800,000. So a 20% down payment is 160. It's going to be closer to 170 or close to $170,000 for a 20% down payment on a median home here in California. Okay, so we're talking about a lot of money that needs to be saved, and lifestyle creep will essentially take away our ability to buy that house. Okay, if you like to travel, and you feel having experiences that open your eyes and enrich your life, if those are important to you, right, and you want to save up for, a 1 month vacation or something like that, lifestyle creep is going to prevent you from being able to save up that money to take that amazing vacation. Okay, so it really gets away from meeting our long-term goals. But another one is if you're planning on retiring, where you're actually, don't want to have to work. Well, if you're saving for retirement, look, most of us today, we're not going to get a defined benefit pension the way a lot of people did 75 years ago. Okay, back in the 50s and on into the 60s. Okay, come the 70s, the way pensions worked started to change. And so now most pensions are what are called defined contribution pensions, where we decide how much each pay period or each month or whatever the periodicity is of the payments, we decide how much that payment is going to be. And then when it comes time to retire, whatever pot of money we have available, that's what we have available for retirement. So if you are not among the very small group any longer that has a defined benefit pension, mostly government workers and people in unions, okay, which is actually not a large percentage of the overall workforce. So you probably have a defined contribution pension. Lifestyle creep can prevent you or diminish the amount of money you're saving for retirement, which means you may have to delay retirement and or you may not be able to retire at all, right? Now, I'm not saying lifestyle creep is the only thing that can cause that to happen. There are other factors, things happen in life, right? But the most important aspect of saving for retirement is to put away money on a periodic basis, at least monthly, so that it builds up over time. And so, if you're letting things like eating out too often or increases in your basic monthly, unnecessary increases in your basic monthly expenses, like internet service and telephone service, if those start taking large parts of your income, especially if they're pushing you to where you're spending more than you're making, so you're not going to be able to save up for those long term to meet those long term financial goals. You're not going to be able to save for retirement. Okay, so thought I'd share with you. This is kind of an extreme example, but it's one that I think really illustrates the point. So I know someone who, for most of this person's life, lived off of. This person made, somewhere in the very high five to low six figures each year. So, or on balance, around $100,000 a year. Now, that's a nice income. Okay, it doesn't go particularly far here in Los Angeles, but in a lot of places, that's a very nice income. Okay, and that's the lifestyle that the person could afford. But the person always felt compelled to spend more than that income. And at one point, the person's father gave the person money periodically, and so the lifestyle creep was being funded, right, by a third party. Okay, so now the person, there's no one in the person's life to help this person control the spending. So the person's spending first doubled to about 20,000 a month, even though the income earning potential didn't really change. Very, very low, six figures now, 120, 130,000 a year. Okay. The spending doubled to 20,000 a month. And then in another year and a half, it was up to $50,000 a month. Okay. So you may be saying, well, wait, the person can only make $130,000 a year. How can the person even afford to spend $50,000 a month? Well, the person inherited money when the person's parents passed away. And so this person had a big chunk of money that is being spent. Okay. Most recently, the person started spending $75,000 a month. Okay. So that's $900,000 a year. Okay. Here's the problem. The person's inheritance is rapidly being spent. So instead of holding on to the money this person inherited and living off of the income of the capital to enhance this person's life over the whole length of the person's remaining life, the person is spending all the money. And it's completely unsustainable because once all the money is gone, the person still only has the earning capacity of about $130,000, $140,000 a year. But now the person is habituated to an enormous lifestyle. So the other question you may ask is what is this person spending money on? Well, the person eats out virtually every day, okay, buys a lot of clothes, pays for things for other people in this person's life, right? But again, it's completely unsustainable. But this is how insidious lifestyle creep can be. And like I described for myself when I used to pick up checks, I think the person gets a dopamine hit from being able to spend all this money. The problem is when the money runs out, okay, what's going to happen then, right? So the person is really setting himself up for, disaster is really what it's coming down to. This is how bad it can get. But you can see, how it got out. The person had a problem with spending all this person's life. Okay. A parent bailed the person out while the parent was alive. Then the parent died. Both parents died, actually. Left a nice inheritance. Okay. But there was no one around to help the person control the spending. And so the inheritance only exacerbated the lifestyle creep. Okay. And what a shame. What a shame, right? Because the person could have lived a relatively comfortable life if the person hadn't gotten so deeply enmeshed in lifestyle creep. So now you say, well, that's crazy. That doesn't happen to most people. You're right. It doesn't happen to most people, but it does happen to a lot of people when they get a big chunk of money. So the people who win a lottery, lottery winnings, right? It's a very high percentage of people that within a few years have spent all that money, right? So when we get a windfall, that's a particularly important time to be focused on not letting lifestyle creep take us over. Okay. We don't want to be like the person I described. We don't want to be like a lottery winner and blow all the money. And now we're used to a much higher lifestyle than we can afford. And we don't have a slightest chance of sustaining that lifestyle. So these are real life examples of how things get out of control. And I do find it. So I'm a big fan of Hollywood, classic Hollywood, really in particular. The 30s through the 50s Hollywood. I love the movies of that period. And it's so interesting to read about various famous people. So one of my favorite actors is William Powell. Okay, he did the Thin Man movies with Myrna Loy. Okay, if you haven't seen them, by the way, you got to watch these movies. I'm gonna have to do a Jiggers' Place on the Thin Man, I think. So he was a very popular actor, and he wasn't in the most, the very top tier. He wasn't, Clark Gable or Cary Grant, or John Wayne. These were the top actors of all time. But he was kind of in the next tier below that. And I read the one biography I could find about him, and interestingly enough, he lived a very financially disciplined life, so that when he decided to retire, he retired to the Palm Springs area. I figured out the numbers. He had at the time the equivalent of about $7 million. Now you may say, well, $7 million doesn't sound like a whole lot of money for a top Hollywood actor, but for the time in which William Powell was in Hollywood, it was a nice number. Okay. And he was able to stop working and live in a nice home in the Palm Springs area with his wife. And he lived a very comfortable life. And he really enjoyed, kind of the later years of his life. In contrast to so many other actors who made a lot of money, in their day. And at the end of their life, they could never stop working because they had spent all their money, because the Hollywood lifestyle can be very lavish. And so people have, huge houses, and they throw big parties and all the kind of stuff that you hear that seem like they're cliches, but they're not. They're real in the Hollywood. And the social pressures oftentimes to keep up with that lifestyle is very high. So you can see that some people are able to handle it. Others, they get into making a lot of money, and lifestyle creep takes them over. No matter how much money they made, they never have enough. So the counterpoint to that is Peggy Lee. So I'm also a big music fan, and I read a biography of Peggy Lee, very, very popular singer, especially in the 50s and 60s, but continued to be very popular pretty much throughout, the rest of her life. She could never control her spending. No matter how much money she made, she was always spending more. She lived in houses that were too big and fancy for her lifestyle. She spent money on all kinds, on clothes and pets and booze and all kinds of things. And people would borrow money from her, or they would come live with her, and she would spend money, taking care of them, right? And she made, tens of millions of dollars over her career, and had virtually nothing left in the end, right? And so, you could argue, well, look, she spent what she made. She had a great time in her life. Okay, that may be the case. And I'm not saying that, Peggy Lee lived differently than what she intended to do. I don't know. I never got to meet her, unfortunately. But that's the sort of counterexample to William Powell, right? So these are the things I think we need to keep in mind when we start to prosper financially. What are we really going to do? Okay. So how do we control lifestyle creep? Going to take a break and come back and talk about that. Probate and Trust TV, your curated source for the most useful and insightful content on estate planning and trust and probate administration, featuring standout professionals like Bill Gross, Paul Brabelet, James Cunningham, and yours truly. Whether you're a lawyer, accountant, real estate professional, or working on your own succession plan, this channel helps you quickly find the clearest, most practical content YouTube has to offer. Subscribe now to Probate and Trust TV. Spend more time learning, less time searching. So this is the way, People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we're talking about lifestyle creep. And we've talked about what it is, why it happens, the psychology behind it. We've looked at some practical example or some real world examples. So now I'm going to talk about how do we spot it and control it or stop it. Okay. So one of the things we need to do is track our expenses on a regular basis. I recommend at least monthly you track your expenses. Okay, you don't need. I mean, unless you're making a lot of money and you have a lot of expenses coming in, I don't think you need to do it more than monthly. On the other hand, if you have a very modest income and you don't have a lot of expenses, maybe you only need to look at it quarterly, okay, every 3 months. But in any event, you need to set up what we call in the military a battle rhythm for tracking your expenses and where you're at financially. So I know for me, I track my expenses monthly. I reconcile my checking account, my checking accounts and my credit card accounts, and I see, where have I spent money, and is anything, getting out of hand. Okay. Now, so that's number one. We need to periodically check in financially. And by the way, it's not fun. I mean, I'll admit that it's not fun. Okay, but part of being an adult is we do things that are important to do regardless of getting pleasure from them. Okay, and so to be a responsible adult is to be financially responsible. And so we need to balance our checking account and reconcile our credit cards on a regular basis. For most of it's probably going to be monthly. Okay, so that's one thing we need to do. Now, again, depending on how complex our spending is, we may need to create a budget. Okay, and see whether we're, and then when we do our periodic assessment of our financial situation, we need to see, are we on track with our budget? Okay, so again, if you're on a modest income, a fixed income, your expenses are well under control almost all the time, so then maybe you don't need to have a budget because you're already habituated to living within the financial constraint of your income. Okay, but if you're younger, if your income is growing, and if you have certain financial goals that you're seeking to achieve, then budgeting is important. Okay, because while you can track your income and expenses on a, let's say, monthly basis, whether you're adhering to the discipline that will help you reach your goals is a matter of knowing, well, what should I be spending in various categories, and am I staying within those spending constraints? And that's what budgeting will allow you to do. Now, if you use a tool like Quicken, which is what I use, I find Quicken to be very frustrating at times, but on the other hand, there isn't anything particularly better. Then Quicken has a budgeting function in it, right? And so you can do a budget pretty easily and quickly. Okay, if not, just get an Excel spreadsheet out and use and put your budget in an Excel spreadsheet. By the way, with tools like Chat GPT, although I haven't tried this yet, I realize in retrospect I should have tried this in preparation for today's show. But I bet you that if you were to tell Chat GPT, hey, my income is $8,000 a month, and my rent is X, and my car expense is Y, and my food expense is Z, or whatever your expenses are, and I want to save up to buy a house that costs $600,000, and I want to be able to do that in the next 5 years. I bet you Chat GPT would come up with a budget for you that's going to be pretty close, if not spot on, to what you really need to do. And let me just, I use Chat GPT just because that's the large learning model that I use most regularly, but you could use Claude, You can use the one that's on X, Grout or Grok, I think it's called. So different large language models are better at certain tasks. Okay, so just as an aside, I recommend you start playing with all of them, the free version of all of them. But use the tool, the AIs. When I say AIs in this context, I mean large language models. They have improved so much over just the last year. They're tremendously powerful, and they can help you avoid lifestyle creep. They won't prevent you from doing so, but they can definitely help you. So track your expenses, budget, and have clear financial goals. Okay. So if you say, well, I want to buy a house, I have a goal to buy a house. Okay, that's fine. But where is the house? How much is it going to cost? How much do you need to how much of a down payment do you need to make? Now a down payment can vary. If you're a veteran like me, I qualify for a VA loan, which means I need to have a down payment of 0 as long as the house I'm buying is at the median home price or below for the area in which I live. Okay. In some areas, you can get an FHA loan where the down payment is roughly, I say roughly because it's not exactly, but it's roughly 5%. That's very different. That's a very different financial goal if you're going to buy a house using an FHA loan than it is buying one with a conventional loan where the down payment has to be, or typically would be 20%, right? So be specific, be clear in your financial goals. When do you want to buy the house? Well, I want to buy a house. Well, when? Well, eventually. Okay, that's not a goal. That's a wish. Okay. A goal has, among other things, a specific date by which you want to achieve it. You say, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do so by then. Well, I get it. Set the date anyway. Set the date that you think is reasonably achievable, because that will help you build the discipline to meet the goal. Even if you miss the date on your goal initially, you'll be much better off having set the date than if you just keep the goal vague. Okay. And then the last thing is be mindful in your spending. Okay. So when you're in a store, especially when you're in the grocery store, let's say, and they've got all that stuff there that you can see it's usually like candy and magazines and that kind of stuff. And it's there because that is the key place for impulse buying, right? And this is one of the reasons, by the way, I use self-checkout, because it's harder to impulse buy when you're self-checking out, because you're not standing there waiting to be the next person to check out, surrounded by stuff that's tantalizing to buy, like a Snickers bar, right? Or, a magazine with some, article that looks interesting to read, or whatever it is. Okay. So we want to be like when I go into a store, okay, I already have, if not actually written down on paper, in my mind, okay, a list of what I want to buy. And if I pick up something else that's not on the list with the thought that I will buy it, before I put it into my cart or my basket, I think, okay, wait, do I really need this? Is this something that's going to make my life better? And that may sound highfalutin, but oftentimes the answer is no. And so a lot of times I look at it and go, well, it'd be nice to have, but no, put it back on the shelf. Okay. The place that I'm most challenged is when I'm checking out at Ralph's, and at the self-checkout, they have a kiosk of Krispy Kreme donuts, right? It's like, oh, just kill me now, right? Because I love Krispy Kreme donuts. They're right there. It's just easy to pick up a box of them. And I've had to train myself, don't pick up the Krispy Kreme donuts, okay? Your waist doesn't need them. Your health doesn't need them. Your pocketbook doesn't need them, right? So once in a blue moon, like for Hanukkah, the Jewish holiday that's usually in December, right? I get donuts because one of the practices of the holiday is to eat donuts, right? So I say, okay, well, I have to wait for Hanukkah until I get donuts. Okay. Sometimes for, Thanksgiving morning, I'll get a, couple of Krispy Kreme donuts to have while, you know, because it's a holiday. But other than that, I've had to train myself. Don't impulse buy Krispy Kreme donuts because you just don't need to waste money that way. And it's also not good for other reasons. Okay. And by the way, this is not a knock on Krispy Kremes. They're fantastic. Okay. All right. So we need to have these practical strategies. Okay. Especially if you are saving up to meet a long-term goal. So I've talked about this book in a previous show, The Richest Man in Babylon. And the philosophy there is pay yourself first, right? So let's say you're saving for retirement. So you should have your finances set up. So when you get a paycheck, which is you're probably getting it electronically, the next day, there's going to be an automatic debit out of your account of money to go into your retirement account. Or maybe it's going through your payroll service. So when you get paid, the money goes directly into your retirement account. It never comes into your checking account ever, right? So pay yourself first. Again, especially if you are working on meeting a long-term goal, retirement, buying a house. Okay. So depending on the payroll system that you have, if you're in your own business or that your employer has, oftentimes you can set up automatic deductions to a retirement plan. Okay. Maybe not though for something like saving up for the down payment of a house, but for it, you can have a separate savings account where you save up for your down payment. And if you know that you get paid, that your salary goes into your account, let's say on the 1st and the 16th of each month. So, on the 2nd and the 17th, you can make a debit of the amount each pay period that you want to save up toward that down payment. Just set that up automatically. Okay. And that way it goes out of your account and you're done, right? Pay those things first. Okay. All right. So what are some ways that you can upgrade your lifestyle, okay, without falling into lifestyle creep, okay? So one of the things I think it's most important is to really understand what is important to you in life. And this is really the essence of the Way to Wow shows, and it's really what the 3 pillars of attainment is there to help you figure out. Okay. What success looks like for me and what success looks like for you are probably different. Okay. And unlike when I was a young man and earlier, where society pretty much said what success was, right? Success was graduating high school, going to college, getting a good job, earning ever more money, getting married, buying a house, having children, and retiring when you were 65 and not having to work ever again. That's how success was defined, basically, culturally. Okay. The problem with that is it worked for the people who fought World War II and for essentially their children, my parents, people my parents' age. Okay. It didn't work for anybody before that, and it's not going to work for the baby boomers or any succeeding generation. So we have to determine what success looks like. Okay. Now, maybe that traditional definition of success is your definition. I think, by the way, many parts of it are good. The idea of getting married, creating a stable home, although I don't know that you necessarily have to own a home. It really depends on where you're living and why you're living there. Okay. Having children. Okay. And building a life together with someone. I think those are, to my mind, those are very important aspects of success that I think societally we should still support because of what they mean for the overall quality of life for everyone in the United States, for that matter, in the world. Okay. But on the other hand, should should we all have a goal to retire at 65? No, I don't think so. Number one, it's not practical anymore. Number two, there are a lot of people who they retire and they miss the activity of work, the social interaction of work, the purpose that work gave them. Okay, and I was having this conversation with some friends yesterday, and you know I'm next month I will be 65. Okay, so in theory, I guess I'm supposed to be retiring then. But I was saying to the friends, you know, I might like to slow down once I hit maybe 70. Okay. But I don't think I'm ever going to stop working because what I do helps give my life purpose and meaning. Okay. I have a mission in life, as you might imagine, right? And so um, I have no intention of retiring at age 70, let alone age 65. Okay. So we each need to figure out what is truly important to us in life. And then we need to craft our finances in a way that supports the purpose and mission we have in life. Okay. So if it's very important for you to be a world traveler, okay, to join the Traveler Century Club, okay, it's a club where to it's not to belong to it, but to sort of reach the goal in the club is to travel to 100 countries essentially. Okay. By the way, I think that's a great goal. I'm at 18 right now. Okay, so I thought I would be farther along, but for various reasons I'm not. Okay, so there's a certain cost to doing that. Okay, my friend Bruce and his wife Terry, I think they're way beyond the century mark in terms of countries they visit. They've been to all 7 continents, and they've been to I think over 100 countries at this point, right? It's important. Travel is an important part of their life. It enriches them, and it enriches their marriage as well, I think, right? So they've crafted their finances in such a way that it allows them to take a big trip each year after tax season is open, because Bruce is my accountant, and so you know, like most accountants, tax season is grueling, getting all the tax returns done or getting as many done as you can, putting the rest on extension, like me. and and then he and his wife, you know, Bruce and Terry, they go on a trip. Okay, and so we need to craft our financial discipline to meet what it is that's most important to us in life, and that starts with understanding our purpose and our mission in life. Okay. And then we can build in using some of the tools I discussed, whether it's tracking expenses, budgeting, setting clear financial goals. We can build in those defenses that will prevent lifestyle creep. Okay. The final, uh, you might do what's sometimes called a value audit. Okay. So when you look at something, it's like, is this really going to add value to my life? That's the question I ask myself oftentimes now, as when I'm, you know, contemplating a purchase. Is this going to add value to my life? Okay, so I'll give you just a small example. Um, there is a you know, good dental hygiene, right? I floss every day, right? Now, you know, I am, as some of you know, I am not an environmentalist. Okay, environmentalism is not my religion. Judaism is. Okay, but I've been a conservationist my whole life. Okay, well, pretty much my whole life since I was, I think, 7 or 8 years old. Okay, and it turns out that regular dental floss gets into the ecosystem. Okay, and it causes problems for wildlife, especially if it gets into the ocean, and that bothers me, right? And so over the last year, I've started buying a type of dental floss that disintegrates once it's essentially put into a trash dump, and it disintegrates quickly. Now it's a little more expensive than just, regular dental floss. Okay. The trade-off is because I use dental floss that's a little bit more expensive, I one of the things I don't eat out very often. Okay. Not even once a week. Okay. Because it's more important for me to do something that I think improves the overall um, natural environment than it is for me to eat out or eat out a lot. Okay. So that's a trade off I've made based on my values. Okay. Now, some of you are listening to this and going, okay, I got to stop listening to this guy because he is a fool. Okay. Fine. I'll own it. Although I do think black dental floss is just cool. It's just cool. That's all I can tell you. Aside from its better, conservation position. But these are the kinds of value audits that we need to make on small things and large things. Okay. Do we really need $100,000 car? I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it wouldn't be nice to have one, but I don't have one. I don't have any plans to buy one. I know someone several years ago, like his goal was to buy a Bentley. Okay. Now, fine. And by the way, when he bought it, he could afford it. Good for him. I'll never have that goal. I don't. I like cars, but it's not in my values to own a car that expensive. Okay? It doesn't do anything for me. For me, it would embarrass me, frankly. I drive a Jeep. Okay, a four-door Jeep, but a Jeep. Okay, so these are the kind of value audits that we need to make. Okay, and we need to be ever diligent in staving off lifestyle creep so that we can live the lives that we truly want. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me today, especially my live viewers. If you have questions, comments, thoughts, please share them in social media, or you can email me. All of those the social media links and email address will be in the show notes when the episode posts on YouTube, so feel free. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific time is my show, Jiggers' Place. It's my every other week show, and I'm going to be talking about etiquette. Okay, one of my favorite subjects. If you saw Jiggers' Place a couple of months ago, my friend Steve Fox was on when I talked about why you should read 19th century literature. Steve is going to be there tomorrow, Thursday. I don't know if he's going to join me for the show. I'm going to try and entice him to, and I think you will see even greater consternation as I try to convince Steve why etiquette is important. So join me tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific time at Jiggers' Place. We'll have a cocktail and a schmooze. And then Friday this week is Independence Day. So there'll be a special edition of the Way to Wow show for the 4th of July at 10 a.m. Friday. I hope you will join me for that as part of your celebration. I hope you'll fly your American flag. I know I'm going to give them a free plug. I don't know anybody who works there, but I got my Allegiance American flag. It's beautiful. I love being able to fly it. So I hope you will consider putting out your American flag and celebrate the United States on Friday, July 4th, and join me for a special edition of the Way to Wow show at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And then next week on Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time is my show, Trust and Estates Weekly. And Tuesday at 10 a.m. is my show, Business Lessons from the Military. And then a week from today, I'll be back with the next edition of People Making Money. So I thank you very much for joining me, wishing you a wonderful rest of the day, and signing off as I always do. Marie, darling, you are my